professional learning community? Because that's a question we get all the time. This meeting is called to order. I want to make
Here you go. The most important part.
It's the most fun part. We're ready to go. Like, you guys are the stars of the show today. So I would like to welcome Jordan Perez and Aubrey Cloud from Lucky Mute Watershed Council Preservation. I had to get all the words in there. To talk to us a little bit about wetlands and watersheds in our area and the impact of various things on them. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say, and you're here because we specifically asked for you to be here. So thank you for coming.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I guess we had a little, I'm Jordan of the group, by the way. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with us, if you've met Aubrey or anyone before. I've been with Lucky Mute Watershed Council now for just over 6 months as the new director there. But the organization has been around since the early 2000s and started off very grassroots around here and has grown up and evolved in several projects throughout the whole Polk and northern parts of Benton County. The Lucky Watershed Council also has purview over the Ash Creek watershed. And I think that's a little bit of what you all want to hear about today. So Aubrey is our project manager. He's been with us since 2016. 2020. Yeah, I've been working in the region and involved in projects, whether working directly with Lucky Mute or not, for quite some time. So it's quite a bit more familiar with the projects that have been taking place on the Ash Creek watershed than I am. So he's going to be able to lend a little bit more direct experience and background to some of those projects. I wasn't sure 100% what today's meeting was like, the scope of the meeting or how much. I'm not sure if there's other things or if it's mostly us, but we wanted to kind of just give you some information about the work that we've done in the past along the Ash Creek. And it sounds, if I believe, that there's some interest in understanding how development may affect the watershed throughout the area. So I think that we'll try and touch on that and maybe just ask some more or deal with some more questions back and forth, and that might give us a little more direction as to what you'd like to know. So we've been doing projects. Our project coordinator, Suzanne Teller, so she went ahead and got some information just together for us, just so I can get some better dates. I'm not sure how many of y'all have been involved directly with the Watershed Council or with some of the projects that have happened around Ash Creek. But right around the school, we've had involvement since about 2013. And right behind the school there, or behind Talmadge Middle School, and I think it was Talmadge Elementary, right? Or Ash Creek Elementary.
Not super close there yet, but currently most of our work has been focused around Talmadge.
Yeah, so within that corridor and stretch. So since 2014, we've had over 30 different volunteer events in that area and throughout that stretch of Monmouth Independence kind of corridor of Ash Creek. We've had a lot of great programs with the schools over time. So in 2015, we had worked with the high school there, with Talmadge Middle School. But then we've doing volunteer plantings along Ash Creek. In 2016, we worked with local biology teacher to develop a program, the Environmental Club or E-Club. And that was a one where students actually got to participate and learn about propagating plants, trees and shrubs throughout the riparian corridor there. And that, it seemed like, culminated with a big planting of about 60 different live stakes along Ash Creek at the Talmadge Middle School. So you can probably, I'm assuming live stakes would be willows, most likely. So you could probably go there today and see large willow growth because they do grow pretty quickly. So from 2016 to now, they've probably grown in size quite a bit if the deer didn't get them. And then that's continued throughout the year. So we've had several projects there. From what I understand, this has been a great connection to the community there. As to where our watershed really expands all the way into Kings Valley, up into Falls City, Dallas, and is ultimately the arterial like drainage from the high regions over there, all the way down to the Willamette. So it's where all the water basically drains out of the hills into the Willamette. And along the way, that connects through, rural properties into farming, and then ultimately gets in here into some more urban areas before ultimately connecting into the Willamette. Along the way, there's several different kinds of projects and things that we get involved with, from fish passage, trying to open up and restore habitat for salmonids, and that can be anything from putting wood placement in river systems and creek systems to try and restore the gravel beds needed for their spawning, to trying to eliminate barriers to fish getting to those spawning grounds, such as perched culverts, different impediments that humans have left from old practices that have been left behind, no longer in use, but now are barriers that fish can't get through. And then a lot of our work down here in town and these more urban watersheds is getting into a lot more of the riparian restoration to try and restore that shade cover on the creek systems there, trying to restore the vegetation that is naturally going to absorb the waters into the system, trying to do what we can to bring it as close as possible back to the natural flow of things. Humans tend to like to straighten out streams and make them as fast and as smooth as possible. And nature wants things to be meandering and slow moving. Because of private properties and different interests that people have in those, that doesn't always coincide. So we seek to find collaboration voluntarily with landowners to where we can find kind of a middle ground to where everybody can get a little bit of a benefit from it. And that can be, what can often be beneficial to the environment, it is also beneficial to landowners. So that could be preventing flood runoff, preventing a lot of those mass, sorry, I got a little erosion and things that can happen through that. So, yeah. Here in town, I think Aubrey could speak a little bit more about Ash Creek in particular and some of the projects that we've done there.
Yeah, and just to spin off a little bit of what Jordan was saying, watershed councils, they're 501c3 nonprofits, and they're interesting because they have a little bit more, I wouldn't say dedicated state funding, because we're not directly funded by the state, but we are one of the few types of organizations that are eligible for certain pots of restoration money. The Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board is the primary one that funds a lot of the work we do. And because of that, almost every watershed in the state has a watershed council stewarding those lands. And as Jordan said, it's geographically defined rather than political borders. So the idea behind that is to take a more ecologically centered approach to land stewardship. Whereas when counties or states manage natural resources, you get these arbitrary borders and boundaries that don't necessarily line up with what the land itself is wanting to do. And because we're eligible for that funding, we're able to apply for grants and achieve and implement really effective habitat restoration projects, and most of them are geared towards restoring or improving fish habitat. Fish are kind of our core mission focus. We're generally an environmental group. We generally steward everything within the geography of our watershed, but the core focus is fish, and especially trout and salmon. Salmonids is the term. And increasingly now culturally significant species like lamprey, which have a lot of like historical significance for tribes. And the reason for that is because the runs of those fish have been declining, as I'm sure you're all familiar, for a very long time, and some are listed as endangered species. Interestingly, one of those, the spring run Chinook salmon, is an listed endangered, and it actually does utilize Ash Creek. It doesn't spawn on Ash Creek, but during high flow events on the Willamette, they will seek refuge because they don't want to be in there, like taking the full force of the Willamette. But they need spots to get off and rest, eat, build up fat reserves to get through the winter, and avoid predators, things like that. And these side channels and tributaries like Ash Creek are really important for that. And they have been observed and documented using this system. So not only do we know that some of our kind of mission critical species are here and using this system, but it also happens to be the largest urban center within our stewardship area. The Luckamute watershed actually doesn't drain anything out of Monmouth and Independence. Ash Creek is its own watershed, as you know. It drains directly to the Willamette. It doesn't feed into the Luckamute. But most of the watershed councils were kind of asked to adopt certain like smaller miscellaneous tributaries and little mini basins like that aren't part of the big tributaries like the Santiam and the Long Tom and the Mackenzie and things like that. And so the Luckamute, we kind of adopted the Ash Creek watershed. And so when you look at a map of our service area, it actually includes both. And this is the biggest urban center in our service area. I think the next biggest is Falls City, which is a bit smaller. But anyway, a large part of the focus in Ash Creek, because it's been so heavily channelized and dredged throughout the years in order to improve the conveyance of floodwater kind of through and out of the city as fast as possible, which is an understandable desire. It's been really heavily impacted, and it doesn't have the kind of lateral freedom to bang around and get water out onto the floodplain, which is where those fish really want to be hanging out during those high flows. So we're looking for opportunities to kind of bring a little bit of that health back to the extent that is reasonable within developed urban infrastructure. So we're not like broadening the floodplain very much, but in areas where there is natural space and undeveloped space still present, we are doing a lot of revegetation programs. So we plant, we control invasive plant species, which are usually what is already there and dominating the space and outcompeting the reestablishment of native species. And after kind of doing that site prep phase and clearing those invasive species, we'll install native woody trees and shrub species. We usually don't mess with like grasses and flowers and stuff, because that's kind of a much more ephemeral process, and we're trying to restore like system processes on a little bit more of a macro scale. And so once those trees and shrubs are established, they're providing shade to the creek. Water temperature is recognized as the leading water quality issue impacting our native salmonids. We're lucky we're not on the East Coast where we have a bunch of mine tailings leaching toxic chemicals into the water. Our water doesn't catch on fire randomly, which is great.
Always reassuring.
Yes, right. So the main thing is temperature. Our native fish are cold water adapted, and they really struggle once the water temperature peaks above 18 degrees Celsius. And if that's sustained for very long, or if it spikes, especially above 23 degrees Celsius, that's when they really check out. And so our top thing we're trying to do kind of as a baseline is just keep that water cool. And one of the most effective ways to do that is through shading it. If you've ever sat under a tree in the summer, you probably can feel the difference, and the fish can too. And there's certain techniques and like methodologies and approaches that have been hammered out and experimented with and calibrated since kind of the late 2000s in terms of how to do that most efficiently. There was a lot of inspiration taken from forestry. If you've seen the planters up in timberlands with the big bags at their waist with hundreds of little trees in them. It's a lot more efficient than lugging around the same number of like container plants from the nursery. And we've gotten pretty good at that. And a lot of our projects, if you've ever, for example, been to Lucknow State Natural Area, which is at the confluence of the Lucknow River and the Willamette, it's a beautiful state park. And we have over 10 years of really successful restoration, specifically revegetation projects there. And you can see those at various stages of establishment, and they're doing really well and thriving. Ash Creek has been a particularly tough nut for us to crack. And the main reason for that is most of our projects that we do, the main barrier to success is weeds, invasive weeds, blackberry, thistles, teasel, things like that. We're pretty good at controlling those long enough for the natives to establish themselves. Here we have probably one of the most intense deer browse pressures that I've encountered on any project.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. What pressure?
Oh, I'm sorry, browsing from deer.
Oh, deer
Yeah.
browsing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, they like our tasty buffet that we lay out for them.
Yes, they do, right?
Yeah. We think the reason is it's kind of one of the few real green oases in the middle of kind of all the concrete around here. And it's also kind of a connected corridor that they use as a highway to traverse this urban area in the first place. So our plantings have for many years been in the line of fire, like immediately for them. And it's interesting, the Talmadge Middle School stretch is our most kind of successful part of the Ash Creek restoration scope, I would say. And that's because there's that active trail there and all the human presence kind of the deer avoid that a little bit more. And so
Middle school kids.
yeah. Yeah, that too. And so that one is pretty well established. The other parts kind of up and downstream of it have kind of struggled, and most of what's survived has been things that deer don't like Oregon grape. So we've been spending the last few years recalibrating our approach and figuring out what strategies do and don't work with the deer, and then are also like financially feasible to implement. So it's been a little bit of an experimental situation these last few years, but that's been the core of our focus. I think I have here, we've been doing this work so far on about close to 13.5 acres of the Ash Creek, the main stem of Ash Creek from the Monmouth Public Works, like holding ponds, down to Wildfang Park, if you're familiar with where that is. And then we did have a little bit up at Riverview Park, but that has had some other challenges, which I won't get into now. But the main crux of it is Monmouth Public Works to Wildfang. And it's getting to the point where we figured out successful strategies, and we're just kind of getting it over the finish line now. And we're kind of eager and excited to look for other opportunities to implement future phases of restoration work along Ash Creek. And there's a lot of opportunities, including on the school district property on 16th Street there. There's not the main stem of Ash Creek, but that drainage just south of Ash Creek Elementary School that feeds into Ash Creek. And that's an area that we're hoping to do some restoration work in, and this is a great opportunity to start a conversation.
So is that a place that, oh,
No, go ahead.
is that little stem, is that a place where the salmon would or could seek refuge?
I highly doubt that they would make it up there, because that's not, it's not the main stem or one of the, the north or south fork of Ash Creek. I haven't done a fish survey, so I don't know for sure, but I suspect they are not physically there, but it's really close and it is feeding water into there. So all the associated benefits that we talk about when we talk about the reason we do restoration, that is having a direct impact on the salmon. And so that's things like cooling the water that feeds in, that they're just, it won't take long for it to travel from that spot to the main stem, and they're living in that. It intercepts and filters out kind of pollutants from runoff from the street during storm events. It stores and recharges water in the ground, and then meters it out more slowly throughout the year, which is really important in the summer when flows start to dry up, and that can make a big difference in terms of keeping the flow going a little bit longer, things like that. And many other reasons, things they eat like insects and smaller fish are probably up there, and everything's connected, is I guess the takeaway.
Well, you have to answer a couple of the questions. Since you guys are the pros, I would like to know, and you've already covered quite a bit of it, the positive impact of wetlands on a community versus mitigated wetland on the community. The overall realistic benefits of wetlands versus civilization and progress. All of that. It would be interesting to hear. I mean, you just explained a lot,
Yeah.
Peggy. But just from a purely scientific / social aspect, what benefit? Well, you mentioned the area on 16th. What benefit does that have to our communities?
That's a great question. I think it's probably the central question to conservation, restoration, and how humans are or aren't going to interface with that going forward. I think there's multiple, I don't think it's one answer, I think it's multiple. Humans, I think we lose sight of the fact that we are just another species. We came from this earth, and we are as much a part of its systems as any other, even if we've done a really good job of kind of convincing ourselves that we live in our houses and nature is out there and somewhere else. Really extreme examples are tornadoes and wildfires and the natural disasters, but there's everything else that leads up to that. And so diversity and stability are the best, I think, mitigating factors that you can cultivate in a community before you get to the point of disaster. And so wetlands and waterways and things like that, healthy riparian buffers that give the stream a little room to move around and go up and down with the seasons. That's going to have a stabilizing and protective effect for the community if you're talking about things like floods or other hazards.
Fires.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And then it also, like I was saying, in answer to the other question, it has a balancing effect during other extremes as well. Recharging groundwater is really important to maintaining water resources when drought happens, and as climate change continues to progress, water stresses are going to be a thing that we have to deal with. We are lucky to live in a region with a ton of water resources compared to like Arizona or New Mexico or something. That doesn't mean they're not gonna get more scarce, and we're gonna have to think about how to manage those. And so the more kind of natural recharge we can encourage and cultivate, I think the better buffered we're gonna be and the more resilient we'll be in the face of that. Then you get into all kinds of other, there's communities and people are more than our economic output, and we need places to recreate, we need places to, build a family and raise a family together and learn about nature and the world that we all share. And these natural areas, having one be in your community instead of having to book a trip to Yellowstone, I think is really important. They're great natural classrooms, and
we are like, in as much as it is a beautiful natural area around here, I mean, you go to the edge of town and it's rolling hills, but it is predominantly private land around here. Lucky Mute State Natural Area is one of the rare public land spaces that we have. An area like this, like we were talking about the area on 16th Street being property of the school district there, maybe some of the only opportunities that those school children of the Monmouth Independence communities here might actually have access to see and witness some of the wildlife that lives within a riparian system. They might not have the ability to travel to Yellowstone or something of that nature that's quite expensive. And as we keep developing and growing, there's those areas shrink down to where they are these linear oases, these little ribbons of natural amongst the concrete and the roads and the development. And eventually those human noises start to overtake, to where there's children that'll be raised, across the river in Independence or in Portland that will never know the sound of the frogs out there. I might not see the deer eating all of the precious trees that Aubrey's planting. Having that opportunity there provides an opportunity for future generations of kids to actually witness and have hands-on experiences with nature, which has a profound lasting effect. And then also now there's new studies that are coming out, and we're learning more about, you may have heard of nature bathing, and the benefits of being in nature for, I believe it's only something like 28 to 30 minutes, and just sitting there still and taking in the noises of the wild animals, and it has dramatic effects on anxiety and stress. It's a pretty consistent theme that you hear with school children these days, is these raising levels of anxiety that they encounter that past generations have never experienced. Having something like that right there in the heart of the community, especially adjacent to schools, may be something that could be, focused, brought in even more than was and is currently happening into the curriculum. So providing that opportunity for kids to have that direct connection to the community, to that learning of nature, to that absorbing the mental health benefits of nature. Having something like that there is a continually limiting resource, and that's a great place for it next to a school, and again, providing a source right in the heart of town where kids and people might not be able to have.
I have one more question. I'll be quiet so my comments.
And I also want to add one more thing on it,
Okay.
please.
But in terms of the wetlands that are around here, the whole Ash Creek drainage system, the ones on 16th, some there's a few others. In terms of CO2 storage versus O2 output, and our concern with global warming, do you have any concept of how much our wetlands around here might contribute to the carbon dioxide storage?
Like sequestering,
Yes, so we don't have like direct studies in the Willamette Valley for its habitats currently, but someone is working on that. I believe it's the Nature Conservancy, but don't quote me on that, is like in the middle of doing a study. They've approached us actually to use some of the work we've done at the Lucknow State Natural Area for one of their study sites. And they are working to develop some kind of rule of thumb model for this region specifically. And the idea is that when we're putting in grant proposals to potential funders, we can use that to say this project will help sequester X tons of carbon or something like that. That said, for the time being, there are general rules of thumb that you can use, and they should not be taken exactly, but it's like, it gets you in the ballpark. One that I've heard is that one mature tree will sequester about 50 pounds of carbon each year. So if you go out and count how many mature trees you got or that you expect to get through restoration planting, you can get some kind of number there. And then there's also kind of per acre estimates. There's an acre of forest in the US is currently sequestering on average somewhere between 38 and 90 tons of carbon annually, depending on, the mass. So there's rough guides.
Per acre.
Per acre, and that's annually, yeah. So yeah, you can pin a rough number on it right now, and then hopefully in the nearest term, we'll be able to get a little bit more precise of a number through studies that are ongoing. And then I don't know how we're doing on time. I just want to
Please.
I just want to add one more thing. Your question about human versus natural needs. That's actually, you've hit on a really big debate in conservation and the realm of conservation. They call it sparing versus sharing. And it's the idea of when we think about restoration or conservation or just, stewarding the earth, should we try and just make a ton of protected areas like Yellowstone and Yosemite and all those and hope that we can make enough of them that will save nature, and then we can keep doing our thing in cities or ranches or wherever? Or do we need to try and find out ways to integrate human needs and the needs of natural ecosystems more kind of holistically? And I personally fall a lot more into the sharing category, where I think if we can put people on the moon, we can figure out how to meet our basic needs and create thriving communities that also happen to be healthy ecosystems that do a lot for all our passengers on this planet.
So does Ash Creek run through Inspiration Garden?
The South Fork of Ashley Creek does, yeah.
Does it? And so they've done quite a bit of building up there. I mean, it's a really nice place and a nice park. And I'm guessing that hasn't had a negative impact on Ash Creek, or maybe it has.
Are you referring to the gardens itself, or
just the building there, the building, the road, it's
I mean, they have that riparian pathway right next to it, down a little bit.
Yeah.
So is it still protecting that area, even though there's development very close to it?
Yeah.
I mean, I was wondering that also.
It's a good question. I've been to Inspiration Gardens. It's beautiful. I really like it there. Inspiration is interesting. It's kind of like, if you're looking at it purely through a habitat lens, it's a mixed bag, but I would say it's a lot better than kind of when houses are built right up to it and things like that. They do have sections of native trees and shrubs and stuff, and those definitely are creating habitat value. And it's hard surface and armored banks are much harder on the stream, and a little footpath. I mean, if it was really heavily used and it was leading to a ton of erosion, and maybe, but erosion is actually a natural process, and that does happen naturally, and like deer create deer trail. Like, I don't think that's probably a huge concern.
And that seems to be down within the low and high water mark as well, so it's within the natural stream bed down there as well, just based off of that, so I don't know that if it was asphalt or something like that, it may be, or if it was getting super heavy used.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's having a really severe.
I would agree. I think Inspiration Gardens is probably a net positive.
So it's probably like the best of a bad situation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, and there's even some like just objectively good there too. Yeah. Yeah, I think I would take, if all of Ash Creek throughout the whole of Monmouth and Independence was Inspiration Gardens, I think that'd be great.
On that same sharing versus sparing idea, I had written down when you were talking about landowner collaboration, because that's what you're talking about, right? Like, how can we achieve some of our goals and still work together? So, like, can you give us some examples of what that looks like? What kind of projects do you do in that collaboration?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's actually, I would say, one of the strengths of the Watershed Council model, because we're nonprofits, and that is by design. We're very intentionally not a regulatory government agency or authority. We have no ability to tell someone what to do. We build our projects purely based on voluntary partnerships with landowners and other potential partners who may have a stake in that project for some reason. And it's proven really successful. We've done a lot of really good work, as have most of the other watershed councils. People who may be resistant to working with a government authority because they're worried that someone's going to tell them what to do on their land, or fine them, or something like that. That in most cases, that just isn't an issue. I mean, it isn't an issue with us, but that concern in most cases from people isn't an issue with us, because we just aren't empowered to do that. It's purely voluntary. And we build coalitions. That's another advantage, is like if it was like a state park or a county or something, they have their tax lot or tax lots that they can work on and do some good there, but then their up and downstream neighbors could be dumping stuff in the creek or whatever. And no one's doing that. I'm just demonstrating the kind of like small disconnected scale of that kind of work, whereas we can come in and build coalitions where we can talk to every landowner on that waterway and get enough of them to sign on that we're having like a systemic benefit to that particular project area. And
word of mouth, it spreads amongst the community,
Yeah.
amongst them. We have tours for our projects afterwards, where we'll actually arrange for buses or vans to shuttle people to project sites to participate, so other prospective landowners can see the work. They can actually meet the property owners, speak to them about their past, about their history, and get the opportunity to kind of squash some of those concerns. But on a daily basis, when we go to speak to people anywhere, everyone will say, wait, so you're not a government agency? You're not a regulatory? It's no matter how long we're in the community, every watershed council runs into that, to where people think that we're an authority of that, but we're purely focused on the outcome. And that's where we, I think, shine, and having our community talks, our outreach events, our citizen sciences at some of the local businesses, collaborating with them, and then having some of the public land partners as well. State park system and things opens up more venues for us to reach more people, working with the schools, having those opportunities. but I think that it all ties in through word of mouth and through the community and the projects that we do. It all kind of spreads through that, but people are still, hesitant, just because no matter what, it's hard to think, that somebody's going to tell you what to do on your land. And we don't want to tell you what you have to do. We just want to inform you of some of the options, ways to where it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. There's different degrees to restoration.
Exactly. And then, apologize for going on that long preamble, but the crux of your question, some examples. A lot of times what we end up doing is being the entity who can track down funding to pay for the projects, and then coordinate the implementation of it and handle administrative responsibilities like grant reporting. That a lot of landowners just wouldn't have the time, even if they have the ability to do on their own. And so pretty much everything we do, unless someone is like really excited and volunteering some of their own cash as like match or something, basically it's always at no cost to the landowner or whoever the partner is. We find the funding and bring it to the project. So it's totally free, unless they're just super stoked and add some to the pile. And sometimes that's just dealing with some weeds that are a problem for them, and they've, man, I'm trying to get this blackberry taken care of, but I've got I'm too busy on the farm or whatever. Sometimes that's all it is. And sometimes it's replacing a failing bridge that they've got on their drive, or like crossing the creek on their property. We've even worked with timber producers like Starker Forest to replace bridges up on forest roads, or do culvert replacements. And that is like an actual infrastructural improvement that is objectively, it's great for the fish, but it's also just objectively better than whatever was kind of rotting out there before. So that kind of thing. And again, that's usually free unless they're kicking in voluntarily.
Reclamation of previous agricultural sites, maybe a new landowner comes in and they don't have an interest in all of their property being agricultural use. Maybe there's an area that they think would be better suited. They see the amount of erosion happening, maybe because of the amount of consistent agricultural happening there, and now it's degraded the land. Maybe they say, they think it might be a little bit better, and Avery Atherton site, some of the properties work out there. Again, folks get word of mouth out through different landowners and see that. We also partner a lot with the soil and water conservation districts, so they help if people are calling in about their property to the soil and water conservation districts and discussing some erosion issues they have or flooding issues. They may be put in touch with us and say, hey, why don't you, I'm going to invite these guys to come out to your property. Why don't you just ask them some of the questions? And we might find a unique solution to a problem that folks didn't know. It doesn't have to, again, be either or. There's a lot of different partnering and different kinds of restoration that people can do.
Yeah, there's other programs available as well. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the CREP program, or Conservation River Reserve Enhancement Program. That's administered by the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, but it's a program where landowners can set aside a portion of their land for conservation value and do some restoration uplift, and then they get some basically tax relief from that there. I don't know any land, so I don't know exactly what the relief pencils out to be, but there's like a benefit to them from that. We work with several project partners who have that on their land, and we're bringing additional funds to help them meet all the requirements to qualify for that program by doing the restoration on that those acres. The one he was referencing, a project where the river ate away enough of the bank that they couldn't get their sheep out to this field that they were grazing them. So they just decided to put those acres in prep as well, and we were able to help them do everything they needed to make that happen.
Tell me what CREP stands for again, just so I have it.
Oh, yes, Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. And there's also, you can do conservation easements on your property. Land trusts are usually the organizations that will be able to help you navigate that process. And that again is another way to get some tax deferral or relief. I know there's the ag deferral program in Oregon where you get tax deferral if you're doing agricultural use, and there is a habitat, like wildlife habitat version of that's spinning online right now. And some landowners are already starting to take advantage of that. So there's various programs, and if we can't help you, we can point you to the agency or partner who would know.
So projects like Aubrey was saying with like bridges, we have a project where we're kind of in the early stages of working to do a culvert replacement in the King Valley region out there, a failing culvert which was misaligned, so it was creating excess erosion to the cliff right by a house that's adjacent there. So it is by fixing that project, replacing that culvert is going to be replaced with a bridge. It's going to twofold, so that will both help salmon, so it's going to provide fish passage, so it's going to allow the salmon to get to their spawning grounds more easily without having to try and jump up through a culvert. And then it's also going to eliminate that culvert shooting high velocity water right at the property owners, the banks right undermining the foundations of their home. So it has those twofold benefit right there. And then we've done projects, the floodplain restoration and projects on the public lands out there with the state parks. And in the future going forward, we have kind of a vision that's been kind of slowly curved as we're transitioning with staff and things to get more involved with the stormwater runoff, with that kind of slowing the flow of contaminants from our streets, from our driveways, as it all eventually makes its way in, and helping to educate and provide landowners with alternative options than just a downspout right to the street and to the stream, but maybe doing with rain gardens and things of that nature. So that's some of the future things that we're looking to kind of get involved locally with.
Very nice information.
Yeah.
Excellent questions.
It's a lot to digest.
I don't know. And I think I understand the process in Oregon, and I don't know if it's just Oregon or it's nationwide, but that when, I believe there's regulation that when a wetland is significantly altered or ultimately destroyed, that the people doing that, let's say contractors, I don't want to make it sound evil, but you know, it's just that they are required to make another wetland somewhere in, I'll just say Oregon. I don't know if it's the United States, but it doesn't have to be constructed in the area, the city or the county where it happens. That's part of the question. And the second part, still in my mind, is how long does it take a mitigated wetland to actually start performing like a naturally formed wetland? So am I correct that they are required to construct some form of wetland somewhere?
Yes.
And does it have to be the same size?
So the honest answer is I don't know, because I don't do a lot of mitigation wetland work, so I don't have that information off the top of my head. It's something I can look up and I can get the information for you. But some form of mitigation is required. And some counties might require additional, like above and beyond state requirements. You can look up mapped wetlands on the Department of State Lands. There's an online inventory that you can look through. In terms of the success, again, I don't have a ton of direct experience working with mitigation wetlands, so I don't know off the top of my head. What I will say is that from various partners and colleagues who have worked more in that field, who I've spoken with, a general consensus that I've heard from them is that mitigation wetlands very rarely end up equaling the wetland that was lost in terms of function and biodiversity supported and things like that. It's better than nothing, but it's pretty rare that it is a true one-to-one offset. And I believe part of the reason is because if you're creating a wetland somewhere where it isn't naturally occurring, that requires some level of input, and funding, like all resources, is pretty limited. You can't keep shoveling that into it forever, so you might be able to get it off to a good start. But
After the ribbon's cut,
yeah,
there's
exactly.
long-term maintenance, like with anything. Nobody likes to pay for maintenance, they like to pay for the initial thing. And so it takes constant management and care to get to that. And it's more like down to the levels of bacteria in the soil have to be right, the soil substrates have to be right. There's just a lot of those micro level inputs that have to be there. You can try to introduce, the microbiomes and things to get those right. But if you're not constantly managing them, it's easy for it to get out of whack and out of balance, I would say, without it being like professionally managed constantly, and then the cost to do that versus the normal. That doesn't mean that it's can't.
Yeah, and sometimes it is necessary. Like sometimes you got to build something.
Something's better than nothing.
Yeah. So it's all. I would say it would come down to the specifics of what you're considering, and is this worth the offset? Because leaving an existing wetland where it is and maybe even doing some restoration on that will ecologically always be better and preferable to a mitigation wetland. But again, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah.
You answered it, thank you.
Yeah.
And they mentioned some projects with the middle school and the teachers there. I mean, is this a resource that we actually use?
Mhm.
How frequently? I've literally never heard that we were doing
When I was a
that.
principal there, 150 years ago, yeah, we used Ash Creek all the time. They went down there and they planted willow trees and they sampled, the acidity of the water and all sorts of things that middle school kids would do. And it was very popular.
It's a real highlight for the kids.
I think there might have been a little tapering off during COVID, and our outreach coordinator, Suzanne, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us tonight, would probably be able to speak more to our efforts to kind of kickstart that. And then I'm personally not sure what's going on in terms of the faculty, but it's definitely something that's been going on for a while.
I think that with a lot of those things, it comes down to individual teachers or guidance or what's interested. I think that COVID really kind of just like changed a lot of things really fast, and we all got kind of amnesia about the before times and things.
We continue to rebuild those.
But yeah, some of these collaborations, like Suzanne's like written here from 2017 to 2022, that there was exactly what you're talking about. There was like a collaboration with, it says Dave Beatley, Talent School there, and using the riparian area right out there to do science experiments with the school, with STEM, measuring water level monitoring, plant and animal identification, nature observations, bird nesting installations. And then even with tribal partners have gotten involved with restoration projects and things in that region. So I think that it is a resource is there, and it just comes down to awareness and maybe recording and sharing those things in a way to, making it a more of a blueprint to where it continues or something. So,
It's an amazing resource
yeah.
for teaching kids biology.
I used to, not in this one, but one of my favorite things in my past life was Ranger Jordan and the classroom, and I used to go to a local community school and was able to take the K through, fifth grade down right to the creek right there, and the amount of, standard curriculum that can be taught in nature in an actual applied way versus the textbook where kids are just like zoning out. You could teach them physics, you can teach them force and motion, you can teach them all kinds of things in a water system right there. And then biodiversity. So all of your earth sciences can be taught, utilizing these things, but then you can also get into nature, into like English and writing and literature. Think about Walton and how we, hear about that. So it has opportunities to just grow and expand. Yeah.
And then a little bit of trivia for you. One of Talmadge Middle School's alums actually manages now today Talking Water Gardens in Albany. I don't know if you're familiar. I've been there. Yeah, it's really lovely. He works for Albany Public Works. His name is Joseph Deerdorf. You know Joe? Oh, yeah?
That's in a total urban area.
It is.
It's just surrounded by houses.
And that's a really cool project. That's a great example of green infrastructure because that was an engineered wetland to help cool water from the city to meet.
What's it called? Again, I never heard of it.
Talking Waters.
Yeah, it's really good.
Talking water.
Really pretty.
I don't think I
It's in
Albany. Yeah, it's very pretty.
Yeah.
Or where it's located,
Yeah.
it's literally in the middle of.
Massive.
Yeah.
Cottonwoods
just
and
unreal.
everything there.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, he's a former coworker of mine, and I was very surprised one day when he mentioned that he went to Talmadge. So it must be inspiring.
Independence Elementary, so the creek that's behind there, is that also a part of what you all support?
Independent, do you mean Ash Creek or?
No. Is that Independence, sorry, my fault.
Fourth Street area?
4th Street,
A
little,
I live in Corvallis, so I'm a little.
yeah, no, that's right. I just wonder, I know there's one, but there is actually one behind IES that, I know they go and do a ton of projects out there during the teachers do. So I just wasn't sure if that was also a part of where, is it part of what?
We got a lot of trash out of that street.
Yeah, there's
Well,
a,
thank you.
so that was my wonder if that was also a part of the.
Yes. It's
The project.
Yeah, just right down.
I'm assuming it's part of the Ash Creek drainage, but I'm not I don't know.
Yeah,
that I
we
know
did,
that.
in November, was it? There in Pioneer Park, which is really
Yeah.
close to that.
Correct, yes.
That area there, some landowners called us in about, and we worked with Independence Park System there to remove a lot of, debris and trash that was used from everything from just dumping from, past culture, that's just the way that it was, to people utilizing trash to reinforce banks of streams. So we moved everything from concrete to tires, to all kinds of garbage out of there. And then that area though is just beautiful. Once once you can remove a lot of the trash, in just 2 days, we removed about 3 car parking spots worth of trash piled up. And then you get that out of there, and the more time we spent down there, I'm just like, wow, this is right in the middle of town. It's just beautiful, massive towering cottonwoods and the alders there. It's a public access park right down to get to that. And then, the property owners there. And I'm assuming with that school, that's some of your legacy plantings.
Yes, so it's definitely interfaced with our project. That reach of the creek has
Okay.
interfaced in various ways. There's no plantings yet. When we did the initial planting project, that whole stretch from like Wild Thing to Riverview, we didn't plant anything, but we sent contractors through to control tree ivy, English ivy growing up the trees and threatening to strangle them basically. And so we did a big sweep to knock back the English ivy on the trees. And that was really effective, and we'll probably need to look at maybe doing that again sometime soon, as well as other. That stretch, Wild Thing to Riverview, is an area of keen interest to us for future phases of restoration work, and it looks like that is pretty close to Independence Elementary.
Yeah.
Pioneer Park, as Jordan said, we just did some big volunteer cleanups, and we'll probably have more in that area, including along the railroad trestle. So yes, is I guess the
Thank you.
roundabout.
I just wondered, I assumed it was, but I wanted to know.
We have some recurring flooding in at some of the schools, the elementary schools. And I'm just kind of wondering now if some of these
I would call it
restoration.
ground swell.
But but do some of these restoration projects, could they have positive benefits for that? I'm not really sure how it's all connected.
Our playground, I'll say it
Yeah,
nicely.
you
Our
explain it.
playgrounds can flood, as in rains coming this way. We're so close to so many creeks, and so we know, again, like you all have explained, that goes into the ground. It has to continue to be absorbed. I mean, it's gonna come up and go over, but it's also absorbed. That causes us some great issues in our playgrounds that we're trying to work through as a community, because at times, parts of IES's playground can't be used for months at a time. Literally November through March can be very difficult because of the ground and just how much becomes mud. And it's, again, I think
Just squishy.
I think it's a combination of right so far and how much water we're getting both ways.
But if the creeks operate more efficiently, would that help that? I just don't know how that stuff works.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And I haven't seen the site specifically. Is IDS, what is that?
Oh, yes, Independence Elementary.
Oh, so right in there, okay.
Sorry, I shouldn't use acronyms.
Oh, no, I'm ready. It's tough to say, that is kind of the natural state, and that is also the impetus behind why they used to channelize and dredge and stuff, because they want that off the landscape and through here as fast as possible. If you're trying to go for like a low impact, kind of low hanging fruit, I don't know what the tree canopy around there is, but if, mature tree canopy would intercept a lot of the rainwater and maybe slow down the saturation, but over that kind of time span that you're talking about, I don't know if that's.
It should absorb the water more as well.
Yeah, I don't think that probably wouldn't solve it. That might be a case of
constructing, as you say, different alternative construction methods, and looking at other communities that have come up with creative
That are lower impact,
Yeah.
lower negative impact on the actual
Yeah,
creek.
maybe building up like a little bit there and things. So to create a better spot for the kids to utilize. Well, not wholesale change.
Yeah, it's a hard one, and it's hard to say without.
Yeah, sure.
No.
No.
Plant new fence or
So that's asphalt. I mean,
Yeah.
it's half of that playground, I think, or at least a third of it's asphalt.
It just had me wondering if there's a better way to do it than the way that if you were doing a normal reconstruction, most builders are going to do it the most efficient, least expensive way.
Possibly
Maybe.
rain gardening,
Yeah.
like that's something that we are getting asked about in discussions with Bulk Soil and Water Conservation District, partnering a little bit with them on that. And that's certainly newer. It's kind of like a kind of on the horizon technique that is happening of controlling water in the landscape and finding ways to creating a diversion to where the water naturally is going to go and running. So, but not wholesale tiling, like in an agricultural sense of like a straight drainage out to the creek, but maybe having it pooled in a controlled area that you've already chosen. And then it will have plants and it'll have ecological benefits that are positive, while also controlling the flow of the water off of the land.
Yeah, that's definitely an option to explore. There's other low, like you're saying, low impact development options that I don't know this spot, so I don't know if any of it's paved or not, but they make things like permeable concrete, where the water can actually filter through it and infiltrate the ground instead of just
A lattice structure.
So there's definitely options, but like each site is its own unique adventure, so hard to say without seeing.
I feel like I took it off track, but I thought you might know, so thank you.
Good question.
Really good
It's a
question.
good question.
No, that's good, because like that's what, we're looking to enhance wetlands, and I understand that could be a fear, is that we were gonna create flooding and different but we're not against idea of having, the control of the water in certain areas. You understand the human need for that, and the kids not being able to play in the playground, and then they're not going outside because teachers don't want them head to toe mud, and neither do their parents.
They lose shoes,
Right?
they literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leather
So,
shoes.
no,
Never
that's
lost a
interesting.
child?
That sounds like a really interesting dilemma. I would be interested to see it and to kind of
Garden sounds like
craft some
really-
brainstorming session of different ideas for ways to do it.
I built them at one of my properties because I had a drainage issue there.
Oh, nice.
But getting the plants has been still a struggle, but anyway.
I've seen something in the fields north of Monmouth heading out River Road, like you're going to Dallas. And there were large, I'm gonna say like this big white tubes that appeared to be pierced with holes, kind of like
Yeah.
a French drain.
It's Tyler.
And, the first time I went by, I saw those things, and what are they doing? The next time I saw it, they were burying them in the ground. And is that a newer technique for trying
That
to
is, yeah.
be positive about catching water?
It's not a new technique, but yeah, that's when we said tiling and for drainage, that's for agriculture.
Yeah, but it was different than the regular tiles. I mean, these were flexible hoses.
Oh, wow.
It's called tiling.
It's called tiling, even though it's a
Yeah.
flexible
Yeah,
hose.
those, yeah.
And then one assumes then that it drains the water in a more uniform fashion toward whatever.
Expedited fashion.
Expedited.
Yeah. It gets water off the landscape as fast as, not as fast as possible, but it's really old, since, before European settling in the US, and it's come over as like a method from farming, but.
Apparently, I'm just slow in observing that.
Just different versions. Often, there's other versions of it where it's just digging a trench and filling it with large gravels as
Yeah.
well as another version of it. The pipes, I think it's probably just a more modern version of it there, what you're seeing there.
So that just drains it down
Drains
towards
it off.
the watershed, toward the river.
Which maybe that is, the playground is a spot where you could put some of that in to direct it towards a rain garden.
That's what I
Bio
was
retention thing.
Mhm.
That could be an option.
Water slide.
Hmm.
What?
A water slide.
So that would be
It's
fun.
like you're losing shoes, you don't want to lose a child.
I feel like we've asked all the questions.
Really
Does
informative.
anybody else have any other? Is there anything else that maybe we haven't asked about, but you think is important to share with us? And you guys did a great job of getting a lot of information out in a short period of time.
Made me happy.
Well, I'm very grateful that you all were interested and invited us here, and it's great to be able to talk about the work we've been doing. I probably would have had some things to throw in, but you asked a lot of great comprehensive questions. I think you covered it all too. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity at this point to still kind of promote a community here that has a healthy and thriving Ash Creek without meaningfully limiting how the community develops otherwise.
Are those some of the, do you have directions? Are you all interested in, working in this region that you were talking about on 16th Street or in these schools adjacent to the creeks to try and come up with projects in the future to mitigate these, or how can we help? Or is there anything that?
I'm gonna speak as just the superintendent. I think, yes, I think we have some surplus land and we're trying to figure out what's the best approach, right? So we wanted to make sure we bring in key people like you all to give us, what are some ideas that we could use with that land. Again, I think we're always looking at ways to make learning just giving kids the experiences that are hands-on. We're always trying to find ways to do that. And again, whether that's during the school day or in our summer school or after school programming types of things, I think all of that becomes a big part of that conversation. So I think it's and both I was just saying to Susan, I love the sparing versus sharing and what does that look like for us moving forward? I think I'm very appreciative of that, just that approach and what might that look like, because I think we all want to make sure that we're doing what's right, not only for the community, but just for the environment as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that really comes through with the partnership we've already had. The school district, Talmadge is probably a crown jewel in terms of Ash Creek work in the community here. And that would be awesome to be able to develop similar living classrooms by the other schools as well that they can access. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Yep, 5-minute break. Dang it. I can eat my sandwich now. Recess. Thank you. I don't have all of the terminology yet.
This type of recess, not that type of recess.
I'm going to look like
We tied to this.
We're done with that part of it unless, I thought we talked about everything with the watershed council. But, I mean, do we, on a normal PLC, we talk about things, so. I didn't know if anyone had any comments or questions they wanted to discuss while we have a few minutes, because we're running.
I certainly want to thank you guys for having me come.
Thanks for
Yes.
thinking of it, Jan. That was a great idea.
Well, there's a lot of stuff we don't know,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's just always nice to hear what the pros have to say about something. And
Mm-hmm.
I really learned a lot tonight, because quite frankly, I never knew what those people did. And I really didn't, so it's the Lucky Mute watershed, like, well, okay, that's nice. They're taking care of the water, you know, I mean, I'm almost embarrassed to say that, but I had no idea they were so involved with the community and in mitigation and in education. I'm really happy.
You know, it'd be nice to
When
have them come
you
look
do a
at.
project with them though, it's interesting because with my Boy Scouts, we've done projects out at the park that he was talking about down here by the Willamette.
Mhm.
But we've done projects there along Ash Creek. But I've always been on the south side of the creek. I've never done anything on the north side of it. Because we just focused on the south side.
It'd be interesting to have them just kind of look at IES. Because it sounded like they were very interested in, like, at least problem solving that. And they,
I think it's both. Again, even some of the stuff that happened at Ash Creek in that big field there.
well, and they, the funding perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that just how they talk about the collaboration and the coalition approaches, I think that's some good things for us to continue
Yeah, and
to
it's
work through.
great I had no idea, like I was saying, about the way we are already using the creek as part of our education curriculum. And heck, when you don't have enough resources, that's great that we can use that resource that's right outside our door. So
And it's really fun.
it's like outdoor school, but right
It is.
outside the door.
Well, I was going to share with you, my child took creative writing from Ben Gorman last year, and they go to the creek and do their writing and stuff there. So there's a lot
That
of
is cool.
teachers who are using that, even if it's not intentionally this preservation or science-minded piece either.
There's just so much that can be done.
So there's so much over the years that have changed. So you can remember when the bridge wasn't there
Yes.
and
I was
the
12.
public water line, they had us literally 3/2 inch or 3/4 inch pipe that just dumped into Ash Creek so that they didn't have sediment build up on the line along there. And the other thing is when they started the Ash Creek trail stuff that they were talking about, there initially was a plan to have a paved trail all the way from Independence to Monmouth. And so all these things have changed and because of floodplains and everything else, and all the plans have changed. And it's a dynamic thing that changes all the time. So when we built the fire station, the wetlands behind the fire station, at that time, we would have been allowed to mitigate the wetlands behind the fire station. We were allowed, we could have been allowed, we never chose to do it, to dump 50 yards of dirt into the wetlands every year. That was the rules then. Those rules have changed. And so at one point, we looked at selling the wetlands properties behind the fire station. And the Port of Portland was looking at purchasing them to mitigate
What they have up there.
stuff from Portland. Somewhere, I'm guessing somewhere around PDX. And so it was one of those things that if they were going to mitigate one acre of wetlands up there, they had to purchase 3 acres somewhere. It was like, I want to say it was a 3-to-1 or 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 when they were gonna change stuff like that. So those are the kind of things that we need to find out. So,
Well, we only have 5 minutes left, so last chance.
I have a question.
Okay.
And I don't mean to change the subject or be myopic about the things that we talked about in our last meeting,
Mhm.
but I have had a lot of curiosity since the last meeting. And I appreciate you sending, I think Emily sent the hiring procedures and policies from 2021. Is that something we can discuss in a PLC, or do we have to have an executive session? And I just wanted to reiterate my intense interest in looking at those things, understanding the way that we do those things and the ways that jobs might be posted. I've heard that there's some concern over the current posting for the principal position at Central, that it asks for different qualifications than prior principal postings. And so I'm intensely curious about this and very interested given the community concerns that we heard. And so I don't know when or how we talk about that, but I would really like to talk about that.
Well, I remembered that you asked about it at the last meeting, and so
Thank you.
when we were trying to put the agenda together for today, we already had Lucky Mute on the schedule. And I believe there's still some things that are outstanding that we're clarifying.
And there's people on the board right now that weren't on the board in 2022.
Right, I wasn't.
Right.
And that's why I appreciated getting the materials, but that's not the same as a discussion. There's things that I'm confused about, and
So here's what I would add. I would say that probably needs to be done in executive session with my evaluation because it's operational.
okay, that's what I wondered, if it's executive session PLC and if it can be put on the agenda. Because I think that given what we've heard, we would be incredibly remiss as a board to not tackle these things as a structural conversation
So
with what we can talk about.
okay. Because again,
Without going beyond just being operational. I think that's what.
Yeah, I know we
we're
cannot
trying to
talk
say,
about
right.
personnel and people, but I think given the concerns we've heard, we're in like structural systemic area. At least I'd like to understand it better.
well, I guess I want an understanding of what you mean by that.
It seems like we're beyond concerns about people and more concerned about, at least from what we heard at the meeting last time, about the way the district is operationalizing these things.
So I will,
Hirings, firings, and other things.
I will generally say this, anything that is associated with human resources and procedurals, I'm just gonna leave it generally like that, is processed through legal counsel.
Okay.
So I can say that right now, that anything that we've built, done, has had conversations from that
Mhm.
perspective. So, like I said, I think this is an operational conversation, and so I would say this would be then done in my evaluation under that section of my
Perfect.
leadership.
That's what I'd like to see then. And I don't know if we can in executive session talk with legal, because I think I came away from last time knowing that there are legal things, but I know in our history of the United States that what is legal is not always what's right. And I would really like to think about the nuance to all of this and what it's, at least from what we heard from our community, what is happening in our community.
Certainly executive session
Yeah.
would be the only place for that.
Okay.
But I think maybe for, especially newer board members, maybe some general answers to operational procedures could be done before the time of the evaluation. We agree or not?
And that might just be me. I know I'm new.
Again, I think I would want a little bit more information about what operationally.
Well, if we're just talking about operations, if we're just talking about how does a principal listen, how does a principal get let up? How does a teacher get let up? How does a teacher get let up? What's the evaluation process look like? What's the plan of assistance look like?
Again, that's a lot of day-to-day operations that you all hire me to do.
Exactly.
So again, I want to make sure that we're.
Questions, right? You don't understand.
Yeah, I guess I understand it, but given what we've heard, it's not going well.
And we don't have policies. Right?
We have some
We have
policies. Yes, we do.
policies.
Yes, we do.
And so
I read through all of them.
And that's our role, is to do this policy.
Mhm.
So you can go into executive session, again, I would say from an evaluation standpoint, we could generally have that conversation tied to my evaluation. You can also, if there are legal questions, you do have the ability to go on executive session specific and have legal counsel be a part of that, and then they can have conversations with you about those areas. So you do have the flexibility to do either of those. Obviously, that would be Brian Hungerford would be our legal counsel. That is our general, I would say our general education
So
legal
would it-
counsel.
But Jennifer, it was just a question and answer. How does this work? What's the general process?
I think you have to be careful when you get into, there are people involved in hiring and letting people go. And so that starts to we have to be careful about personnel stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I'm just thinking how a general discussion of the protocols the district uses wouldn't have to be a reflection on you. It's just simple.
I think it depends on if you are requesting changes.
Why don't we
Yes,
start
of
with,
course, yeah.
why don't we start with figuring out how we can talk about these things and where we can fit it into an agenda?
Okay.
And as long as we can commit to how we might do that, and will that be enough for today, Melanie?
Yes, thank you.
That work for you?
It's up to you all.
I don't see why we need to tie it to evaluation.
It's operations. So I think if we're going to talk operations, that is specific. I'm your only employee.
Right.
I don't know that what Melanie's saying is specifically operations. It's more like the implications surrounding the process that she has a question. But we should talk about it after we can figure out
'Cause I think
the
that
best way to do that.
I could get trained on the process and know how we craft a job posting, how we hire, how we evaluate, and it still wouldn't answer for me what we saw from our community about what's going on. And so, yeah, I get it. I can see a job posting. I know what those procedures are. But the implications of what we're seeing in our community are not answered by that process. And I think we need to talk about it.
Yeah,
So that would be perfect.
so we'll figure out how we can do that in executive session.
Thank you. Don't mean to be myopic.
Okay, I think we're done then. What do I say at the end? Adjourn.
You're doing great.
I didn't have enough time to prepare.
You're very well prepared.